Hello, Pastor Barry McLaughlin here. Welcome to 7 Minutes of Scripture. If you're just now joining us, welcome to the study. We're going to be continuing our look at Genesis chapter 1. If you're behind on the series, we encourage you to catch up with us here. Maybe watch tonight's video and catch up on all the other ones so you can get the historical context of Genesis. But this is our series in this channel. We focus on breaking down the word verse by verse, one at a time. And without further ado, let's check out Genesis 1, 9 through 12. Yesterday we read this. Then God said, "Let the waters under the heavens be gathered together into one place, and let the dry land appear." And it was so. So yesterday we said that the water was in one place and the land was in one place, not in the same way that we have continents today. So you might see this in like a geology book. It's called Pangea, one giant continent. And it's very likely, it's very likely that these continents that we see now broke up during the flood. The fact that we have continents now and the fact that there used to be a supercontinent is not proof that the Earth is billions of years old, because what people essentially do is they look at the rate at which continents are moving now and they assume that they've always moved that fast in the past. But Genesis 6 and the flood says that God opened up the fountains of the deep. And so you get this idea that there was a lot of geological activity. There was, in fact, water trapped underneath of this giant landmass, or some bit of like maybe under ocean, I don't want to say continent, but under ocean land. We don't exactly know where the fountains of the deep were, but I would imagine it would be something within Pangea, the original continent, or something underneath of the primeval ocean. And God opened that up, and obviously the flood, everything was filled up, obviously above the highest hills and everything else. And so what they assume, though, is that if it's moving a certain rate today, it's always moved that rate, and so you can rewind the clock backwards. But what we find in science and history, and this is like the same with dating methods like carbon dating and stuff, is that some of these rates and conditions have been drastically faster in the past because of what's called catastrophism. That means a giant catastrophe like the flood. We also find that some of these rates and conditions by which things are moving and decaying now, they have not always moved and decayed that way in the past. And so you can't look at today and just literally rewind the clock and assume that you know what happened in the past when you weren't there. And that's what scientists do. That's called uniformitarianism, and it's based on naturalism, that the natural world is all that there is, and the things we see now are the same processes that's always been. And 2 Peter does describe this when he gets into talking about scoffers in the last days, saying, "Where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation." I believe that is 2 Peter 3. You can fact check that. I believe it's 2 Peter 3. That was not actually planned to talk about that tonight. But so people will kind of try to use that as a proof against the Bible, but it doesn't really work, because the continents could have broken apart in a catastrophic event during the global flood, which we know is a global flood based on Genesis chapter 6, and geological sedimentary layers all around the globe that were laid down very fast. And other evidences, of course. And so one of the really key things with this, I lost focus there for a second, sorry. That rarely happens. That was sarcasm, of course, it happens a lot. But yeah, so you can't use today's processes and assume you know everything about the past. You have to use a reliable source of someone who was there. Now, unfortunately, no one was there when the continents, the earth was first formed, so we have to go by God's witness because he was there. He created it. And so we're kind of moving on to verse 10 through 12 here. You know, not obviously in this video, but over the next coming days. But I just kind of want you to understand that this one continent, this idea is not necessarily an anti-biblical one. But let's talk about carbon dating for a second. You think of carbon dating, C14, decay. You also look at that. That can be affected by rates or by conditions as well. So that means we see carbon-14 decay right now, and we can think, okay, so this is a certain amount old. But once we go far enough back in the timeline, it becomes more inaccurate. Bill Nye debated Ken Ham on the age of the Earth. I don't know if you saw that debate. He tried to say, well, there were trees that were older than 10,000 years. They were older than what the Bible timeline would go back with the Genesis genealogies. And that disproves young earth creationism. But the problem is, it is a well-known fact within the science of trees that trees can produce multiple rings per year whenever they are put on certain amounts of stress and other environmental factors. And so to say that, well, this tree has so many rings, so we can determine that the Bible's wrong, is just an argument that I think is pretty pathetic. He's one of the only people that I've ever actually heard make that argument. So we understand that there was a continent, there was water. I know that's a lot of explanation, but I feel like we do need to get into these details. It says, and God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Then God said, let the earth bring forth grass, the herb that yields seed, and the fruit tree that yields fruit according to its kind, whose seed is in itself on the earth. And it was so. And so notice when God creates the living things, they are according to their kind. And that's really key with the Bible. The plants and animals were created according to a certain kind. God created the kinds, so certain kinds of maple trees, certain kinds of animals like dogs, felines. And then we understand that there are different variations within those kinds of animals, but we don't see a small, microscopic being turning into something more complex and then turning into something more complex, turning into apes and then turning into humans. We simply don't see that in the fossil record, nor does biology and genetics support that. But what we do see is that there's all varieties, tall, short, human beings, stature, all kinds of things. We see that animals, dogs, cats have a wide variety, but we don't see dogs mutating or evolving into something else. And we don't see that in the fossil record either. And that's the same with plants. They were created according to their kind, whose seed is in their self. And so God created these plants to be sustaining, food-giving resources for us, for the animals. And we'll get more into those details when we get into 11 and 12, a little bit more detailed. And then get into day 4 next week. If you do want to get ahead, read up through day 4, which is the creation of the stars, the galaxies, all of those types of things. Guys, hopefully this wasn't too deep today. Hopefully you enjoyed it. God bless you, your families, and we'll see you in Monday night's video.